Okay, so this is how you're going to be able to put a reference image into your Cinema 4D file to help you trace it with a spline. Say you're using a spline pen, or you want to use spline primitives, like as in that you're trying to build splines up for a loft or a lathe or something, or if you were going to be using a reference that you were going to model against. There might be lots of reasons why you might want to have a reference. So the thing to remember is you cannot put a reference into the perspective window. So when you want to have an image that you're going to use as a reference, you're going to be putting them into one of the other views that you get when you open up your 4 view. So you might have a top view. Likelihood is you've probably got something more along the lines of a front view or a side view. You could have multiple ones. When you are modeling a specific object, it is great when you're able to get multiple sides, but what you're looking for is a reference that doesn't have perspective built into it. So hopefully you have something that's straight on and doesn't have an angle to it, and that will be the best reference that you can use to model off of. If it has perspective in it, then you have to sort of um, try and not build that into your object. You have to sort of um, improvise around it. So anytime you want to bring an image in, what you're going to do is you're going to go to that particular view. So I have front view. I go to options, and down here you're going to go to configure. Okay, and I'll show you that on the top view too, just so you don't have to see it squished at the bottom. I go to options and configure. Okay, so if you have multiple images that you're importing in, you're going to have to do this for each of those windows. Okay, but again, if you do it in perspective, you'll see that it's actually grayed out. It won't be an option. Okay, so makes most sense to put in the front view. So I'm going to go option, front view, configure. Okay, and then you'll see usually it's going to come up viewport front, and it's going to be on display, the first tab. You're going to go to back. Okay, and then you'll see here back there is an image field. Everything else is grayed out. It will allow you to change these once you import your image. So I go to image, and you see the dot 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 here. You're going to click on that button, and then you can find your reference. So this is the reference that I'm bringing in for this particular project. This is the sort of reference that you would want to, the quality of reference that you would want to use, because you can see that it's a straight on view. There's not too much perspective, and you can tell that by like the lip of the glass here. You're not seeing a big oval or circle here if you're more top view or if you're shooting from below. So the more frontal you can get your references, the better they will be to help you use as a reference, because again, you don't have to deal with funny angles that are built into the image. So I'm going to select that image, open, and now it's in my front view. Okay, now I'll show you some options you can change to make this a little bit easier for yourself to work with. So you can come in here, and you can change the size of it, you can change the placement, and you can change the opacity of this. So if you're looking at this and you're thinking it's going to be hard for you to tell where your object is that's in the object manager, whether it's a spline or it's a primitive, you can't really tell where it is because of the contrast. You can come in here to transparency, and you could make this more transparent, and that will, at least a lot of times, that will allow you to see the object for the reference, but it will also be easy for you to see what you're working with. Okay, so say I put that at like 50% or 65. Okay, and then you could change the size. So if you thought it was too big or too small, you can change that. It is going to resize itself proportionately as long as you leave this checked. And I would suggest in most scenarios, there's no reason why you would uncheck this, okay? Because if you uncheck this, then when you resize it, you're going to squash it or stretch it, and it's going to get distorted, and then it's a useless reference. So you make sure you keep the aspect ratio checked on, and then you can make this bigger and smaller as you need to. Okay, the next thing I will point out is if you are going to be, in this case, for this particular project, if I'm going to be using a lathe to create the profile of the glass, I want to work at 0, 0, 0. So if I want to use this first one, I would actually want to move it over so that I have it in the right placement for when I pull the lathe out instead of having to move it later. So I would actually use the offset here, and you can shift that around. Okay, so this is 0, 0, 0 here. I'm going to line it up with the center of the glass. Okay, and so now when I draw my spline, the glass is in the center here, mostly at least. And now I know that when I trace this, it will be at 0, 0, 0. And then when I bring the lathe in, it should be able to create that geometry from that spline and not create any sort of weird distortion because of the distance. Okay, if I was doing the second one, I would do the same thing, move this reference over. Okay, and the third thing if I was going to do this last one. Okay, but I'm going to do the first one. So I'm going to put that right there. Okay, so that makes things very easy. And then you can always go back out. You see that you will not see it in the other views. So it's specifically linked to that view. So you don't have to worry about having it get in the way of the other views. Okay, now if you had something that you were modeling that had multiple references, you could definitely bring them all in at once, and you would probably find yourself modeling and going back and forth between windows to match it up from, like, say, the front, the side, and the top. But in this case, because I'm just going to trace this so that I can use a lathe, it's not necessary for me to have any other references. And sometimes, it's difficult to get good references for multiple views. But if you can get a good front reference, that tends to go a long way. Okay, so hopefully that is clear and it helps. So again, you go to Option for the particular window, you go to Configure, then you go to Back, tab, and then you load your image into the image field, and then you can change those options once it's loaded. You cannot do this for perspective.